welcome to Following Spirit Without Hesitation, stories from journeys of deepening trust. And with me today I have Tiffany Stephens. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hello.
Hi. So Tiffany and I have just been recollecting how we know each other, and we've been kind of scrolling back through messages. And like many of us these days, we met through social media, but we have mutual friends as well. And we did a session exchange, didn't we? You work with human design, and at the time I was doing something called soul contracts, which I didn't continue with, but they're kind of in the same lineage as another healing modality that I do. And then I also we worked your ancestral work as well. So and then I actually more recently, about this time last year, met you in person for the first time in Glasgow. So it's been quite a few years, since about 5 or 6 years, of this sort of thread of connection, and it's always just lovely looking back, just to see. We were just looking back just to see how much the world has changed over those years. So, is there anything else you'd like to say to introduce yourself, Tiffany?
Um, well, what can I say really? I think in the vein of the conversations that we're having, in human design, I'm a 5/1 heretic, and
Same as me.
same as
Two of
Tanya.
us.
So, yeah, I think that drew us together in our initial conversations, and for both of us, being a 5/1 is about bringing information to the world in one way or the other, in a higher expression. So I'd like to think that I live that in who I am in the world and what I offer to the world through my work. So I think the 5/1 wants to introduce itself, or me to introduce myself through that lens.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So I'm also feeling that, as you're saying, that the essence of spirit moving, not just the 5/1. So what does following spirit mean for you? How does that unfold in your life?
For me, I mean, it's actually a really easy question, because I feel it's listening to the inner voice. It's listening to the whisperings of the soul. This is right for me, this isn't right for me. I need to go and do this. So for me, it's an inner directional voice, knowing, feeling, that I have to do whatever that is, or not do. So for me, that's what following spirit is: following my spirit, following my inner voice.
And has it always been that simple for you?
Um, I would say since my early 20s, yeah, maybe not even 19. Um, I would say yes, that if I followed it, I before I knew anything about human design, which was in more recent years. But what I found, if I follow that voice, then I used to call it the snowball effect when I was younger. That I would take one step on that path of whatever it was, and everything would then snowball and align with that. So
I love how so often we have that intuitive knowing that that's what we're doing, and we come up with our own philosophies, I guess, for that. So do you want to share some of the stories of that snowball effect in your life, Tiffany?
yeah, yeah. If I go back to then, the age 19 version of me, Yeah, I was a teenage single parent. I was married, had a child at 18. Um, that wasn't a particularly good relationship, and so I left it. And so I found myself as a single parent at 19. And I would say within the first year of motherhood, I knew I wasn't a stay-at-home mum. So that was my first kind of big realization. Okay, this isn't who I'm cut out to be in that way. That inspired me to go back to college and to do my A levels. So I left school with three O levels and a GCSE, what they were called back in the day. And so I went back to college and did two A levels, which was world politics and international relations and English literature. Kind of, I've always been left and right brained, so a bit of both there. And I thought by doing that, that I would go into teaching. That was my logical pathway. I'm going to go and get A levels, then I can go on and do teaching education so that I can become a teacher. And then that way, as a single mum, I can have the school holidays off, and that will work really nicely.
Yeah.
So that was the path I thought I was on. But life and the universe always has something different for us. So in the first year of me doing my studies, I used to help out at a local law firm where my next door neighbours worked. I used to go and serve documents or take things to court or help out with the post, and just a little side helping of work. And so through that, I got offered a job there. And so I hadn't intended to work in a law firm. I thought I was going to be a teacher. So I ended up, because they wanted me to start quite soon and I was still at college and it was going to be a full-time job, I crammed the 2-year A-level course into a 1 year and sat the exams a year early. Yeah, a bit bonkers. I came out with an O-level. I didn't get the A-level pass, but I got the equivalent of an O-level, which I thought was pretty good in the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And what that then translated to, once I started the job at the law firm, I started as a receptionist. And one of the women that worked there was training or had trained as a legal executive, which isn't a very commonly known legal position. People usually think of solicitors or barristers, but there's another whole avenue of training called legal executive. So she said to me, "Why don't you do the training?" So again, here's the snowball effect. I go to college. 1, because I'm not a stay-at-home mum. 2, I think teaching is going to be a great thing for me to do as a parent. And then the next thing, I'm in a legal job, and now I'm being suggested that I do the legal training. And the O-level that I got that went with the other 3 that I had was what I needed as the baseline education for me to be able to start this legal training.
Wow.
So then I went on, trained as a legal executive. That training then is the equivalent of a law degree, which I did while I was still working full time and being a single parent.
Wow.
So I studied in my lunch breaks, I studied in the evening at home, and I went on and then did a postgrad in legal practice to become a solicitor. So it was 10 years. 10 years of legal study while I was working. And then within the firm, I worked up. When I qualified as a legal executive, because that's a legal position in its own right, then I then started working as a legal executive. So I'd kind of moved from receptionist to assistant to one of the solicitors, and I became a legal executive, and then I became a solicitor myself, and after that I became a partner of the firm.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was a long journey and a lot
Yeah.
of work, but that snowball
Yes.
started from me going back to college.
Yeah.
Where I
And
left.
how it's almost like this wonderful design that spirit has that we can see in retrospect, right? But we just all these moves, but we couldn't have known, and it's allowing ourselves to align with that in some way and take those opportunities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. So do you have any other stories around following spirit or taking opportunities or changes in your life, perhaps, where spirit has shifted you? You think you're going down one track and spirit then shifts you down somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can go straight into the next example of following spirit. From there, there came a point where my soul said, right, we've done this now, this law thing, and this isn't aligned anymore, and get me out of here. When I loved it, I loved it. When I didn't love it, I didn't love it anymore.
Right,
But
yeah.
it really felt much bigger than that. It felt like on a soul level. I felt like I had a almost personality transplant when I got to the office door. When it was time to leave, it was time to leave.
Yeah.
And I also got to the point of being a lawyer is one of the highest suicide rates. And I actually knew people who I'd transacted with over the years who actually did commit suicide. And I got to the point where I knew what that looked like. I knew what it felt like. I wasn't suicidal, but the pressure and the stress and the get me out of here was very strong. So when
Yeah.
I chose to leave law, people thought I was absolutely bonkers. Having been on this really long journey and now being, in a good job. But, soul said, no, this is it, done.
So,
And
so can I just interrupt,
yeah,
Tiffany? How long
sure.
did you, how from the time of finishing your studies to this no more, how long had that been?
16 years.
Wow, that's a long
Yeah.
time.
So, I started there around 1920, and I left there when I was about 37.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a long time.
36. Yeah, the mid 30s. Um, yeah, so it was a long time. Um, During that time, so I'd taken up doing running and marathon running. I mean, that spawned for me going to get a personal trainer because I was really needing to get back in shape in the late 90s. But ultimately, I'd picked up running and marathon running and all sorts of sporty things. And that was really my escape from the stress of the job. So when I decided, well, I didn't decide, when soul said, when spirit was saying, come on, time up now, I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I decided to train as a personal trainer and go down the fitness route as my new way of making money in the world. And again, same thing. First module of my personal training education, they're talking about, well, there's 10% of the population who have a gym membership and 5% of them use it. And so there's this other 90 to 90% of the population who have a sedentary lifestyle And I'm thinking, and there's all this health related exercise like cardiac rehab and GP referral and all of these things. So it wasn't a very big math to go, am I going to work with the 5 to 10%, or am I going to work with the 90 to 95%?
Mm-hmm.
So literally, as soon as I finished my personal training qualification, I went down the route of training in cardiac rehab, falls prevention, GP referral, and then kind of went straight into the experience of working with people with medical conditions. And
Wow.
through that, learning about the psychology of illness, the effects of medication. Obviously, we needed to know that in order to safely deliver exercise, because you need to know whether if you move someone from that position to that position, if they're going to keel over or, you know, I laugh because the area of law that I was in was one of the most likely that you were going to get sued for. So in the end, I was doing property law, and that's the highest rate of being sued for negligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought when I left law, I'll go into something less risky. And then I'm going, oh, well, now people can die in my classes. You know?
Oh, yeah, you protect
So
yourself from that.
thankfully, that never happened to me. It did happen to one of my colleagues, but yes. So yeah, the risk factor went up, but there was more to the thread of that, which I've kind of lost in how that made. Okay. So there was that happened on the practical plane in
Mm-hmm.
terms of one job to another, and then how the universe lined up which avenue I was going to go down with that. But if I backtrack just a bit, when I was, so because I was a partner in the firm, I had to give 6 months notice before leaving the firm. It's a bit of a prison sentence when you don't want to be
Yeah,
somewhere.
that's a long time.
Long time. But within that period, it was fascinating. So in the July of that year, there was a holistic fair. So I used to, when I was younger, like when I was younger, definitely as a child, like from age 10, I already believed in the spirit world. And when my grandmother died when I was 19, she left a load of books by a popular medium of the day in the early mid 80s. But I'd kind of lost my connection with that in that legal world.
Hmm.
So in that time that I was leaving the legal world, a holistic fair was happening one weekend, and a friend of mine from my running club wanted to go. And I love how I might not have gone, but she wanted to go. So I said, okay, I'll go with you, because I'd started getting into crystals and, you know, becoming a bit more bohemian, I guess. But I hadn't fully re-embraced connection yet. So we went to this holistic fair, and my friend wanted to get her tarot cards read. So we went to see this lady, and she said, oh, I haven't got my cards with me, but I can do an aura reading. Now, I'd never had an aura reading, so I thought, well, you know, give it a go. And partway through that reading, she says, oh, your grandmother's here. Would you like me to bring her through for a message? You know, and I thought, well, you know, this is jolly good value here. You know, now I'm getting an aura reading, and now I'm getting a message from my grandmother. And so she came through and said, that we had this gift of healing within our female lineage that came through her, that I had the gift to be a medium. And so from there, that opened a door into a whole new avenue of really why I'm here today. You know, that moment, my grandmother then from there more consciously became a spirit guide.
Yeah.
And being a good girl, I then went and trained in mediumship because I'd lost the connection. I didn't have someone to show me it. So I trained in mediumship. And that then led to spiritual healing within the same organisation, the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London. And then someone I met in that class wanted to do a form of energy healing, and she didn't like traveling by herself. So I said, oh, okay, well, I'll go with you to Newcastle. So we went up to Newcastle and we learned this energy healing modality, and then we went to Whitby together to do the second lot. So then all of a sudden, you know, now I'm clocking up these things that just one thing led to another. So I've gone from this disconnected lawyer all of a sudden to medium, spiritual healer, and energy healing. So yeah.
And so was that part of also was that while you were also doing the rehabilitation work as well as a personal
Yes.
trainer?
Yes.
Whoa,
Yeah. So those
that's
two
amazing.
ran parallel with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Ooh,
again, the left and the right, you know, the physical
yeah.
and the spiritual.
Ah, oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So what happened next then, Tiffany? Or do you have another story? Like, okay.
Well,
What's,
yes.
want to say what's coming? When's the book
What's
coming
next?
out?
What's next? What's next? So the next call of spirit, really. I mean, they are all
Yeah.
calls of spirit, all of them.
Yes.
The next
Very
call of
much so.
spirit was that I needed to move from London to Scotland. So my granddad was from Glasgow, and I grew up with a love of Scotland and a feeling of deep connection with Scotland. Through about 20 years of my adult life, I've been going on holiday to Scotland. And I can remember years before saying to some friends of mine, one day I'm going to move to Scotland. And they're like, well, knowing you, you know, you'll do what you say you're going to do and it will happen. So at the end of 2006, I got the nudge, you can move next year. This is the time. Now you're going to move to Scotland. So I'd been doing the fitness work for maybe 2.5 years. I've built up a business of personal training and classes for about half a dozen different local authorities. And then it was like, okay, well, now we're going to give all of that up because you can't take it with you. And we're going to go to Scotland, we being me and Spirit. So yeah, at the end of 2007, I moved to Glasgow because that's where my granddad came from. And I thought, well, that would be a useful. I mean, I didn't know anything about Glasgow at the time, but I thought, well, that's where I'm going to start and I'm going to move there. In between that, because of all of this spiritual connection with the mediumship and the energy healing and spiritual healing, but I really need to know what spiritual connections I'm going to have when I get to Scotland, because I didn't really have any connections there at all. So I came across an advert in Cygnus Review, which is a book. It was an old book review magazine. I think it came through Watkins Books in London. There was actually a Cygnus book club that you could have. Anyway, I used to get them. It had spiritual books. And right at the back, there's like this 2-line advert for this retreat center in Inverness. And so looking at their website way back then, it said something like, if you do a workshop here, you can become a friend of the place, and then you can come here and stay and visit and whatever. And I thought, well, that would be nice, to know that there's somewhere I can go. I mean, literally, I had no connections. Knew nothing about what happened in Scotland spiritually. Totally showing up blind. So this sounded like a jolly good connection. So play an option, somewhere to go to tap in spiritually. So between that moment and when I was moving, the only thing in the diary was an introduction to shamanism course, weekend course. So I signed up, and I showed up knowing nothing about shamanism at all. You know, my perception was, oh, this is all just drums and feathers kind of perception of it. And had a great weekend, loved it all, you know, learned how to do shamanic journeying. And at the end of it, the teacher was saying, well, I'm starting a practitioner's course. So I signed up, and that was me signing up to become a shamanic practitioner.
Amazing. There's quite a few parallels between, I imagine it's being 5-1s, right, between our stories, you know, children at a youngish age and that. And I had a similar falling into shamanism experience as well. So, wow, amazing. Yeah, and it's interesting as well. I find it really curious just as a perspective, and just because I live 2 hours north of Inverness, and I know the centre that you're talking about, and I kept seeing their leaflets, okay, and thinking, oh, I'd really like to go on a course there. But when I finally did go on a course, it was in Edinburgh. I travelled, and the amount of people who came from, yeah, Edinburgh and Glasgow and would come up to Inverness, and it was like we'd cross in the middle. It's such curious. I guess it's part of that, almost like a pilgrimage, right? Of going to see your teacher.
No, absolutely. You know, and for me, moving, I think the course started like I think it started 2 months before I moved to Scotland. So I was still living in London when I started the practitioner training. I mean, like literally, I went on that course in the summer, and then I was starting the practitioner training within seconds, and then I moved. And so it was really nice because my first year then in Scotland, I had exactly what I'd wanted, was this spiritual connection, because periodically we were going then for a week up to do the training throughout that first year, which then I met people, you know, my spiritual, you know, connection, my connection with people within of spiritual mindedness opened up, and I, you know, was then going through really the next phase of my personal healing as well at the same time, because you know, when you do a shamanic practitioner's course, you're not just learning how to do the spiritual practices, the shamanic practices, you're going through a really deep, profound personal healing process at the same time, in my experience.
Yeah, and initiations as well. I mean,
Yeah,
each weekend is an initiation, isn't it? Each part. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's very,
yeah,
very deep.
absolutely. Yes.
Oh, so welcome. Well, you welcome to Scotland. Oh,
Yes. Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, and then, you know, I've been there 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was a great welcome to Scotland. And I've met so many amazing people through, made so many connections through that place, who live all around Scotland and wider. And I go, how do I know them? Oh, I know them from there. You know, it's
Yeah,
like a web,
it
a really nice
is.
web.
And it's amazing, you know, you kind of, I guess that's partially how we met. You tweak a part of it and then you think, oh, and then you see how they're all connected to everyone. And it's like, oh, I know more people than I realize. It's this, yeah, it comes to life every now and again. And it's so that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mm. So, is there anything else you'd like to share, Tiffany? I'm really enjoying listening to your journey, the stories of your journey, which are very rich. You know, I'm feeling the kind of that the richness of all that unfolded and that movement and um the snowballing effect, right? That you first felt, um, and yet, you know, there is also this uniqueness of our individual movements, you know, through our life, through our path as well. So, yeah, I think what I'm really enjoying is it's like we were speaking earlier about these very distinct, on one hand, very distinct phases in our lives, but then there's these threads that connect them all, and they, you know, all have value and bring the depth, and then pop up and surprise us, right, in unexpected ways. The
Absolutely.
information, we think it's a part of an old life, and suddenly it's like, no. Yeah. So do you have any more stories to share, or
Well,
a
I mean,
continuation?
there is a continuation. If you want me to go there, I'm
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
happy to
yeah.
continue.
I'd love to.
Um, okay, so after the shamanic training, we did a reunion about a year after the shamanic course had ended, because there was more that she wanted to teach us. We went back for another gathering, and around the same time, so this is towards the end, the reunion was September 2009, and about the same time, I went to a shamanic conference in England with a theme of the ancestors that drew me. Um, so really, there was on one hand, the shamanic conference opened me completely to the amount of ancestral healing I still needed to do, and the disconnection that I had with my family lines. And you know, I could go down a whole story of that, which
Mm.
I won't at this point. But that's another whole where I went after that, and the importance of that in my personal life. But during that conference and during the reunion, I kept getting this message: you have to go to South America. And you know, the first time it happened, it's like, okay, that would be lovely. Um, and then I got another message. Yeah, okay, yeah, it'd be really lovely to go to South America. And then in the reunion, we were doing a shamanic journey, and literally this indigenous person just stood up in front of me. We're doing the journey standing on a yoga mat, and this person just stood up in front of me and went, "You have to go to South America." Okay, I'm going. And literally, I came away from there and decided that that's what I was going to do. There wasn't a getting out a map and saying, where in South America am I going? I knew I was going to Peru.
Mm-hmm.
Just knew that's where I was going. And yeah, for some reason, unbeknown to me at the time, I decided that I would give up all my classes. So in the course of this time since I'd moved to Scotland, I built up another business of classes. And you know, people used to say to me, you know, how do you get so many classes? And I'd say, oh, I don't know, people just ring me up and ask me. You know, it just happened. So I'd got this whole business of classes and clients and whatever else in the fitness field, as well as having built up a healing business while I was there. So that, I'd been using all of my tools that I'd gathered over those years. And so that was becoming, again, they were parallel jobs. So there was one out in the world. I could be off teaching a class, and then I'd come back and do a soul retreat for, with love. Oh, here's me doing this, and now here's me doing that. I found it really highly amusing. But I gave up all my fitness classes. I'm going to South America. I thought I was going to move when I came back. I thought, this is it. I'm going to go off, and whatever's going to happen there, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to move. No, still in the same place. But it moved me in a very different way indeed. So off I go to Peru in December 2009. So following spirit, following being told by my inner voice and whoever else. If I don't listen to the inner voice, I'm going to get someone standing out in front of me telling me very clearly, you're not listening. So off I go to Peru. And I knew I was being sent on a spiritual mission. So it wasn't like, well, let me get out a brochure and where am I going and whatever. I knew that whatever I engaged in had to be authentic. The only ceremonies I could find when I looked ahead of time were ayahuasca ceremonies in the jungle, and that wasn't where I was to go. I felt really called to go to the Sacred Valley of Peru. So I just booked 2 nights in Cusco in a hostel and showed up, basically. Booked my flight, booked 2 nights, knew I was going for about 5 weeks, 5-6 weeks, and just went. And it turned out the hostel that I stayed in to begin with was run by a shaman.
Of course.
Of course. Who I'm still in touch with all of these years later.
Amazing.
And yeah, I had a very rough, I'm going to be here for this many weeks. So I'm going to be in the Sacred Valley for this length of time. And then at some point I'm going to go down to Lake Titicaca. That's all I knew. That was it. I've got to be here. And then at some point I've got to go there. And, I'd done a little bit of what happens on what days there. There are some really nice indigenous markets in some of the towns. So as well as the spiritual aspect, I'm really interested in the cultural aspects of places. Mm-hmm. So on my very rough, what am I doing each day? I'd got a notion that I was going to go to this particular town. And in Cusco, there was a shop back then called Magic Hands, which was very intriguing. It had very weird and wonderful things in the window, and I really, just the name and the look of it, I wanted to go there. But every time I went by, it was closed. And then one day I went by, or one evening actually, I was on my way attempting to go to a yoga class, and the shop was open. So I'm like, okay, it's either yoga or the shop, because I can't do both in this minute. So the shop won. And I went inside, and there's a chap there, he's called Inca Jesus, from varying different bloodlines. And he makes all these shamanic jewelry and different other artifacts that are in the shop. And straight away, he's like, oh, you've got a good aura. I check out the color of people's auras before they come in. If I don't like the look of them, I don't open the door. And then he's like, let me have a look at your hands. And he starts doing the full-on aura reading, body reading. Do you know you're only using 30% of the power of your hands? And he starts telling me all of this stuff about past lives. And you know, I'm well into this big experience all of a sudden. There's a couple of stories with this. So this experience in his shop culminates with, I can give you this shaman's meditation, but you need to buy this pendant off me. The pendant was a lot of money. It was triple figures, and I didn't have the money on me because I was on my way to a yoga class. So I left the shop. I went back to the hostel where I was staying. I got the money, and I came back wondering, you know, has this guy put me under a spell? Well, I did think it afterwards. I'm like, what the hell just happened there? I've just spent this amount of money on a pendant. You're like, really? And I know of people who had the same experience where they bought the pendant and really did believe that they had been hoodwinked and didn't value it. I still have the pendant. I value it. And the meditation that he gave me involved burying this pendant and doing all sorts of things with it every month for 8 months at the full moon. And you had to abstain from sex and coffee and alcohol and meat. So there was this whole process that he gave me. So I figured out later on that the amount I paid for the pendant really was less than the price of a workshop or a healing course, which is essentially what he'd given me in this practice that he'd given me with this pendant. Whether I needed the pendant for it or not doesn't matter. But it took me through an 8-month period of healing and clearing. So that was one thing that came from that encounter. But it was the 30th of December. So the next day was New Year's Eve. And he said, you know, what are you doing for the new year? And I said, well, I'd really like to do an authentic ceremony. So he says, go to this town, go to the temple ruins and go to this particular temple and do a meditation there. On my very rough schedule, if I can even call it that, that was the town I had planned to go to the next day.
Whoa.
So the next day, off I go on the bus to this town. And I get off the bus, go up the street, and there's a crystal shop. And I mean, it's like got a carpet of crystals outside. And they had these Peruvian shamanic stones. They're called chimpy stones. And I wanted to ask about them. And the man was talking to someone in the shop. So I waited. And when they finished, the woman he was talking to turned to me, and I had a Triskelay necklace on. And she said, oh, that reminds me of home. And it turned out that she was from England, and the guy with her was her husband. And so we get chatting. And, you know, I said, I'm looking for, you know, doing authentic ceremonies. And whatever I said to them, I had no idea. They said, oh, we're staying at a retreat centre along the river. Why don't you come with us? So I literally left the shop with these complete strangers, having asked the guy whatever I wanted to ask them about those stones. I went off of these complete strangers along the river to this retreat centre. And as we arrived, everyone there was doing a despacho ceremony for the new year.
Amazing.
So I literally walked in on an authentic ceremony. And so before the buses stopped, you know, after we'd done the ceremony and everything, then I had to go back to Cusco. And then as soon as by then I'd extended my stay there. So once my booked nights had run out, I went and stayed at the retreat centre. And that led me on to all sorts of different next steps after that,
Oh,
basically.
it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's more stories that then come from
I'm
going
thinking,
there.
I'm starting to think I didn't take note of the time when we started, and I've become so absorbed by your stories. I think I think we'll have to have you back back
Oh, we can leave a
for a second
cliffhanger.
episode. Yeah, leave the cliffhanger.
That's actually a brilliant joke for what the next installment is.
Okay, guys.
That's
So
a real cliffhanger, isn't it?
if you want to know what the joke is,
Yeah,
you're going to have
exactly.
to wait until Tiffany comes back. It's been Tim, I've really enjoyed your stories, Tiffany. It's
Thank
a
you.
life like so rich in spiritual direction, and just and how, like, once we start more consciously engaging with it, how magical life
Yes,
becomes. It's
yes,
oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is, like we were saying about responding earlier, you know, that is it. It's dancing with the magic of life, being
Mm,
open to, what presents and going with it,
beautiful.
internally and externally.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. You know, I I feel like,
okay.
oh gosh, am I rambling on? But
Oh no,
hopefully not.
I've really enjoyed. Like I say, I kind of before we started, I was saying, sometimes I'll chat back and forth, but I've become so absorbed and almost mesmerized by the stories and the journey of your life. It's just like this river, and I'm just. In fact, I want to say almost like a chocolate river for some reason. That sounds like something like Willy Wonka, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
sounds
But
nice.
or
Sounds delicious.
cacao, right? Cacao of
Yes.
South America, really.
Mm,
That's sort of
absolutely.
something very nourishing and sacred. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone
Thank
who
you.
has watched and listened. And please don't get in touch with Tiffany to ask her what what the joke is. But there's you can get in touch with her if you're interested about other aspects of her work. And I look forward to you coming back, Tiffany.
I look forward to that too.
Sending you much love from my
Send
heart
you much love
to
to you
yours.
too. Thank you.